the email that shattered everything. You know how people joke about breakups, the whole, "at least, she didn't text you to dump you" line. Well, imagine opening your email in the middle of a combat zone, sand sticking to your skin, adrenaline still pumping from a patrol, and finding out your entire marriage ended in a single paragraph. No warning, no phone call, no fight, just click, open, destroy. That's exactly what happened to me. I was stationed overseas, serving my last tour. I'd been married for 4 years, and though things weren't perfect, distance never makes marriage easy. I trusted my wife, Anna, completely. She was my anchor, my reason for getting through the nights when mortar shells shook the ground and the smell of burning diesel clung to everything. Every letter she wrote, every "I miss you" video call, reminded me why I was doing this. So when I checked my email during one of my rare moments of downtime, I wasn't expecting anything heavy. Maybe a shopping receipt, a forwarded meme, or one of her "thinking of you" notes. Instead, the subject line read, "We need to talk." The message was short, too short, almost clinical. "I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. I've filed for divorce. I've taken what I needed from our joint account. Don't contact me." That was it. No explanation, no compassion, no room for questions. At first I thought it was a sick joke. My heart pounded so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I read it once, twice, 10 times, waiting for the words to change. They didn't. Then came the sucker punch. I logged into our bank account, my hands trembling. She wasn't lying. The balance was almost zero. She had cleaned out everything we'd saved, the emergency fund, the deployment pay I'd been putting aside, even the little cushion we'd set up. For when I finally got back home, gone. My stomach dropped like I'd taken a bullet straight to the gut. Out here, in a place where death is literally waiting around every corner, money was the one thing I thought I didn't have to worry about. And she had stripped it away with a few clicks on a computer. I couldn't scream, I couldn't throw anything, I couldn't even talk to anyone. My squad mates were cracking jokes nearby, shoveling down rations, and I sat frozen with that email glowing on my screen. Betrayal hits differently when you're thousands of miles away from home, when you can't just get in a car, drive to her, and demand answers. Out here, you swallow the pain because there's no space for it. You still have to carry a rifle, still have to check corners, still have to keep your head on straight. And yet, my mind kept circling the same questions. Why? Who was she with? How could she do this now, when she knew I couldn't fight back? The worst part wasn't just losing the money, it was the humiliation. My wife had just ended our marriage with an email like she was canceling a gym membership, and she didn't even have the decency to let me respond. That night, lying in my bunk, under the dim flicker of a weak light bulb, I replayed everything. The wedding day, her promises, her letters telling me how proud she was of me. Had it all been fake? Or had she just gotten tired of waiting, tired of the responsibility that came with being a soldier's wife? I thought about calling her, but my pride stopped me. She didn't deserve my voice. She didn't deserve a single second more of my energy. But make no mistake, the anger burned in me hotter than anything I'd ever felt. She thought she could erase me with an email and a bank withdrawal. She thought distance and duty meant I was powerless. What she didn't know was this: I might have been stuck overseas, but I wasn't helpless. She had started a war she wasn't ready to fight, and I promised myself right then, as the desert wind rattled our tent and my squad mates drifted to sleep, that I'd make sure she regretted every single word in that email. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of hers, and she had no idea how ugly it was about to get. I'll never forget that morning. The desert sun had barely risen, painting the horizon in shades of gold and orange. When I logged into the base's painfully slow Wi-Fi, I just wanted to see a message from home. Something simple, something familiar, a little piece of normal life. But what I found instead nearly knocked the air out of my chest. Sitting in my inbox was an email from her. No subject line, just her name. My heart did that stupid hopeful thing. It leaped. Maybe she missed me. Maybe she was finally sending one of those long letters she used to write me back when I first deployed. The kind I would reread during the endless nights. I clicked it open, and then my world stopped. There weren't paragraphs, no heartfelt explanations, just a cold, calculated sentence. I want a divorce. I've already emptied our joint account. That was it. No dear, no love, no sign-off with her name, just a digital execution. At first, I thought it had to be a joke. maybe a cruel prank from one of the guys. But as I read the words again and again, my stomach turned. It was real. My wife, the woman I'd trusted with my heart and future, had ended our marriage with nothing more than a few keystrokes. I sat there in disbelief, hands frozen on the keyboard, staring at the glowing screen. The barracks around me were noisy, laughing, footsteps echoing, someone playing music too loud, but in my head, there was silence, a silence so loud it screamed. I couldn't breathe, my chest tightened. I'd faced combat zones, heard gunfire, and seen men break down from the weight of war. But nothing had ever hit me like that one email. I quickly logged into our bank account, praying she was bluffing, but the numbers stared back at me, colder than her words. Zero, completely drained. Every dollar I'd saved from years of service, gone. That's when the anger started. Not a burst of rage, but a slow, heavy burn in the pit of my stomach. She hadn't just left me, she had destroyed me. I slammed my laptop shut, and one of the guys looked over. "Everything okay?" he asked, casual, not knowing that my whole life had just crumbled. I swallowed hard, forcing the words back down. "Yeah," I lied, because how could I even begin to explain? How do you tell someone that your wife just pulled the plug on your entire marriage with a single line of text? That day was hell. My head wasn't in the mission. Every sound, every order, every step felt distant. My mind kept replaying the email like a broken record. Divorce, empty account, alone. When I finally had a moment to myself, I scrolled through her social media, and that's when the knife twisted deeper. There she was, smiling, laughing, posting pictures from fancy restaurants, expensive boutiques, hotel balconies, overlooking city skylines. She wasn't hiding it, she was flaunting it, and worse, she wasn't alone. In almost every picture, there was this guy, arm around her waist, champagne glasses clinking, expensive watches and tailored suits. She hadn't just left me, she had replaced me. While I was halfway around the world, putting my life on the line, she was living her dream life with someone else using the money I had earned. Betrayal doesn't even begin to describe it. I wanted to smash my phone. I wanted to scream. I wanted answers, but the only thing staring back at me was her smug smile through filtered photos. That night, I lay on my bunk staring at the ceiling. My mind wouldn't shut off. I kept thinking about how fast everything unraveled. One day, I had a wife waiting for me. The next, I was just a line in her past. And that's when the rage crystallized into something sharper. Resolve. If she thought an email would break me, she was wrong. If she thought she could just empty my account, toss me aside, and ride into the sunset with her new toy, she was dead wrong. I didn't know how yet, but I swore to myself, in that moment, I would not let her walk away without consequences. The battlefield had taught me patience, strategy, timing. This was just another kind of war, and I was ready to fight. What she didn't know, what she would never expect, was that the man she thought she left behind wasn't about to disappear quietly. I was going to make sure of it. When I finally returned home, I expected it to feel like stepping back into my life. But it didn't. Everything felt hollow, like I was walking through the ruins of a life that used to be mine. The house still stood, the walls were the same, but the warmth was gone. My wife was gone, and so was the trust that once anchored me. The divorce had been handled mostly through paperwork and attorneys, while I was still overseas. Cold documents, signatures, and legal jargon replaced the conversations that should have been had face to face. She never saw me, never looked me in the eye. She just sent her lawyer to deliver her intentions, and that was it. When I sat down with my attorney, I braced myself for what I already knew. She had drained our joint account, maxed out a couple of credit cards in my name, and left me with the wreckage. The house we once lived in together had been sold. She walked away with her share and left me to pick up the pieces. I felt the weight of betrayal in my chest every time I thought about it. I had risked my life overseas, trusted that the woman I loved was waiting for me, and instead, she treated me like a bank account she could rob on her way out. It wasn't just the money, it was the years, the loyalty, the belief that I had someone in my corner. For weeks, I lived in limbo. I slept on a friend's couch, trying to decide if I should move back into my hometown or start fresh somewhere else. I didn't want to run into her. I didn't want to be reminded of what I had lost. But no matter where I turned, there were reminders, photos I still had on my phone, letters we once wrote each other, memories that replayed when I closed my eyes. but life has a strange way of nudging you forward, even when you don't want to move. One evening, while sorting through my old files and emails, I came across a string of messages. They weren't from her, but from a woman I vaguely remembered meeting years ago through mutual friends. She had stumbled upon me online and reached out with a simple message. "I heard about what happened. If you ever need to talk, I'm here." At first, I ignored it. I wasn't in the mood to open up, but loneliness has a way of wearing you down. One night, I replied. What started as small talk grew into longer conversations. She didn't pity me, didn't try to fix me. She just listened. And for the first time in months, I felt human again. Like I wasn't just a victim of betrayal, but a person who still had a life worth living. Meanwhile, my attorney uncovered more of my ex-wife's antics. She hadn't just emptied our account. She had tried to funnel some money into her new boyfriend's failed business. Thousands of dollars gone, and nothing to show for it. The boyfriend had already bailed when the cash dried up, leaving her stranded and humiliated. It was the kind of poetic justice I didn't need to orchestrate. She destroyed herself with her own greed. I didn't celebrate it. I just felt lighter. Like I could finally let go of the anger and move on. Her downfall wasn't my victory, but it was confirmation that I had made the right choice by not fighting to keep her. One night, sitting outside with a drink in hand, I realized something important. She had taken my money, but she hadn't taken my future. She had betrayed me, but she hadn't broken me. And while she was drowning in her own mess, I was slowly, quietly, learning how to breathe again. The woman I had been talking to online encouraged me to channel my pain into something meaningful. I started working out more, started journaling, even enrolled in a few online courses to prepare for civilian life. Step by step, I was building something new, but I wasn't naive. I knew my ex would come crawling back eventually. People like her always do. And when she did, I wanted to be ready, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with indifference. Because the strongest revenge isn't shouting at the person who betrayed you. It's looking them in the eye and showing them they no longer have power over you. And sure enough, just as I was starting to get my life back in order, I got the email from her, short, desperate, and filled with regret. She said she missed me. She said she wanted to talk. She said we could fix things. I stared at the message for a long time. A part of me wanted to laugh. Another part of me felt the old sting of hurt. But in the end, I closed the email and never replied, because that was the moment I realized I had already won. The moment the judge called the court back into session, I felt my pulse steady. For weeks, I had carried around this quiet fire in my chest, waiting for the right time to let it all out. My ex-wife sat across the room, still dressed in that same air of arrogance, like she owned the space. She hadn't looked at me once during the morning, except for the occasional smirk she shot my way when her lawyer whispered something in her ear. She thought she was untouchable. She thought she had already won. But that illusion was about to shatter. Her lawyer stood up first, presenting a laundry list of demands that read more like a royal decree than a divorce settlement. She wanted half of my pension, full control of the house, spousal support for years, and a share of the benefits I earned during deployment. Listening to him, you would think she had been the one serving overseas, not me. I stayed calm. That was my weapon now. Silence, patience, and timing. When it was my turn, my lawyer rose and handed the judge a thick folder. Inside was everything I had gathered. The bank records that showed where the money went, the receipts for expensive hotels, the credit card charges at fine dining restaurants, and the photographs of her living it up with her new boyfriend while I was stuck in the desert fighting for scraps of normalcy. The judge flipped through the pages slowly, his eyebrows arching higher with every document. My ex-wife's face drained of color as the reality set in. She hadn't expected me to fight back, let alone show up with proof that painted her as the fraud she was. Her lawyer tried to object, muttering about irrelevant evidence and character assassination, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. This evidence is highly relevant, the judge said firmly. It directly relates to the claims being made and the financial situation in question. That was the first crack in her armor. I watched her squirm, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. She finally looked at me then, her eyes wide, searching for some hint of mercy. But she found none. The hearing dragged on for hours, but piece by piece, her web of lies unraveled. Every extravagant purchase she made with a joint account, Every dollar she siphoned out of our savings, every trip she posted online became a nail in her coffin. She had painted herself as the abandoned wife, forced to scrape by while her husband was gone. But the evidence showed a very different picture. She wasn't abandoned. She was indulged. By the time my lawyer finished presenting, the judge leaned back in his chair, sighing heavily. "It is clear to this court," he said, "that the petitioner has acted in bad faith throughout these proceedings. Not only did she misrepresent her financial need, but she misused marital assets for personal gain and concealed her actions until they were uncovered here today." My ex-wife tried to stand, her voice cracking as she begged the judge to hear her side, but it was too late. The damage was done. The judge ruled in my favor on almost every count. She would receive nothing from my pension, no spousal support, and no share of the future benefits. Instead, she was ordered to repay a portion of the money she had taken from the joint account, and the house that she so confidently claimed as hers would be sold, with the profits split fairly. In other words, she had dug her own grave and was now being forced to lie in it. As the gavel came down, signaling the end of the hearing, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I could breathe, but the story didn't end there. Outside the courthouse, she chased me down, her voice shrill as she demanded to know how I could humiliate her like that. "You ruined me," she screamed, her words echoing against the marble walls. People walking by slowed their pace, watching the scene unfold. She looked nothing like the composed, smug woman who had walked into that courtroom earlier. She looked desperate. I stopped and turned to face her. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then I said quietly, "You ruined yourself the moment you hit send on that email." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I walked away, leaving her standing there with the pieces of the life she had tried to build out of my hard work. Word spread quickly after that. Friends she had boasted to on social media disappeared, no longer willing to be associated with her now that her lies were public. Her new boyfriend, the one she drained our savings for, dumped her within weeks, leaving her stranded without money or support. Karma, it seemed, had perfect timing. Meanwhile, my life began to rebuild. It wasn't easy, but it was honest. I poured myself back into my work, reconnected with people who had always been there for me, and slowly started to carve out a new path, one without betrayal hanging over me. Every once in a while, I would get word of her, struggling to keep up with rent, hopping from one short-lived job to another, living in the shadow of the life she thought she deserved but could never sustain. And every time I heard those updates, I felt the same thing. Not joy, not gloating, but closure. Because the truth is, revenge isn't always about striking back. Sometimes, it's about exposing someone for who they really are, and letting the world and karma do the rest. She had tried to break me with an email, but in the end, she only broke herself. I walked away from that chapter of my life knowing two things. First, that betrayal can come from the people you least expect. And second, that strength doesn't come from clinging to the past. It comes from standing tall and moving forward. And so that's what I did. That final day, as I left the courthouse and felt the sunlight on my face, I realized something important. She had taken my money, my trust, and almost my spirit, but she never took my future. That still belonged to me. And as I stepped out into the world again, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would never get the chance to take anything from me ever again. Because in the end, I didn't just survive her betrayal. I turned it into the very thing that set me free.